Hello, welcome to People in Perspective. I'm your host, Diaz, and today joining me is Mike Bennett, who works for the Hotchkiss Police Department. How are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
That's good, I'm good. So, getting into my questions, what made you want to be a police officer?
You know, initially I was a truck driver. I had driven a tractor trailer for 10 years, and I decided that I wanted to change in my career. So began to think about what I'd like to do, and I felt it important to give back to the community. So I wanted to look something something that I give back to society. So one of the choices I came up with was being a police officer, and that's kind of how I got to start in applying for police jobs.
Okay. What was the process like of becoming a police officer?
So the first step, obviously, you fill out an application. There's different websites that you can search to find out what police departments are hiring at that time. Once you fill out the application, then you go through several different steps. There's a written test that you have to take. And in order to move to every next step, you have to pass each one. So most written tests for most police departments, you have to score 70% or better. And then after you're done with the written test, you take a physical test, physical agility test. That's where they're testing you on your strength, your running ability. You have to do sit-ups, push-ups, a sit and reach. And that's more of a pass-fail test. And then once you get through that portion of the physical ability test, you move on to oral interviews. In oral interviews, there's usually a panel of 4 people that ask the recruits questions, and each recruit gets an opportunity to answer each question. And then they take your written test and your oral interviews, and they combine those scores, and they come out with an aggregate score from there. And that's how everybody gets ranked. So, you know, depending on how many people took the test, you'll be ranked through, say, 1 through 50. And as soon as an opening comes up in a police department, they'll begin to call people based off of where you're ranked on the list. Most lists are only good for 2 years. So that list expires, and then you have to go through the whole process again for each department that you test for. So it's pretty labor intensive to start with.
Okay. And in your opinion, out of all of those steps, what do you think was the hardest for you?
The oral interview is stressful if you've never been in a situation like that. You're sitting with other people you're competing with for that job. So there will be 5 candidates. You're speaking to 4 strangers who are in the police force already, and they're asking you various questions about why you wanted to be the police, why you think you'll be a good police officer. So what happens is a lot of the candidates have the same answers, not exactly the same, but in general terms, you're saying a lot of the same things. So you don't know if you're coming across well with the people conducting the questions. You obviously want to stand out a little bit and hope that they remember you, but not for the wrong reasons. Mm-hmm. So the oral interview is stressful.
Okay. And when you were done with that whole process, did you ever second guess yourself, oh, I might not make it or anything like that?
Well, you definitely learn quickly, because once you see where you placed on the roster, if you pass everything and then the list comes out, well, if you're on the lower end of that list, you're probably not going to get called. So you realize pretty quickly, hey, I probably didn't do too well on that. Obviously, the more you test, the more comfortable you get with it. When I tested, though, I didn't test for too many police departments. I had only taken 4 tests before I was called by Hotchkiss.
Okay. Regarding stereotypes with police officers, obviously that's a big problem in today's world. How do you feel about that?
So the biggest problem that we face today is that you're reacting to situations in a split second. And to be judged on a split-second decision is a tough position. Now, I will say police officers are given substantial, we're allowed to use deadly force. That is the most ultimate power that you can be given in any role. We have to make a split-second decision on whether, it's appropriate for us to take a life or not. I think that the media sometimes is quick to judge, and maybe not all the facts have been presented, but there's also police officers that haven't done themselves the greatest of favors in the decisions that they've made either. I think there's a lot of work to be done on our part as officers to work on treating everybody equally in working the case on the facts, on the merits of the case, and not letting any biases feed into it. But I also think that it's important for the media to let the case play out a little bit, learn all the facts before we start making judgments.
Okay. And with that, what are some, besides the media, what are some negatives about being a police officer?
Well, in today's day and age, it's tough being a police officer in that there's a lot of negative stereotypes on police officers right now. We'll respond to just basic calls on an everyday basis, and when we pull up, people feel that we're going to treat them unfairly just because we're the police. You try to make it clear to the people that, hey, I treat everybody fairly across the board, and I'm here to try to help people, not to hurt people. So that's our biggest problem in today's day and age right now, is dealing with the negative stereotype on police officers.
Yeah. And flip to that, what do you think are some positives for being a police officer?
For myself personally, the joy that I get out of the job is when I can help people that are victims of violent crimes, where we can bring a resolution to a family or to a victim themselves and show them that we're there for them, and show compassion and empathy, and really make them feel that they can count on us when they're at their most troubling time in life.
Have you ever had an experience with like a family or just one individual where like they really like were proud that you helped them, or like you just got a sense of joy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent quite a few years on the South Suburban Major Crimes Task Force. On that task force, we're assigned to work homicide investigations. And during that time, I had the opportunity to work several cases where we ultimately did identify and arrest a suspect in a murder. And one that stands out to me is the family of Kelly O'Laughlin. Kelly O'Laughlin was the Lyons Township freshman who was murdered in Indian Head Park. I had an opportunity to work closely with her family and developed a relationship with them. And at the conclusion of that case, the family really has kept in touch with a lot of the guys on the task force and became close with several of the officers that worked that case. And they really showed, what it was for law enforcement and victims to work together to really try to help them move forward.
Okay. And with your field of work and how we were talking about the positives and negatives, would there be anything that you would want to change about it or alter?
Well, I'd love it if we were looked at in a more positive light. I think that there's so many good police officers out there going to work every day, day in and day out, willing to sacrifice their lives if the situation presented itself. I just wish people would take time and realize the sacrifices that these police officers are making.
Yeah. Have you ever had like a crazy experience where you were kind of like scared and you just didn't know what would come out of the situation that you were in?
So one of the most terrifying cases that I had, situations on the job that I had, was just recently. It was January 2017. We were assigned to work a homicide investigation in Evergreen Park, Illinois. A male subject had been killed in his car at 87th and Kedzie in a Walgreens parking lot. As soon as we got activated, within 1 day of the activation, we had a suspect identified in the murder. And we were able to track his movements fairly quickly based off of cell phone technology. And in tracking his movements, we learned that he was on a train leaving the city of Chicago, traveling to the northern suburbs. We were able to, myself and some of the other task force members were able to follow that train, and we were able to get that train stopped in Deerfield, Illinois. At that point, we boarded the Metro train and we attempted to take that suspect into custody. As we approached that suspect, the suspect brandished a firearm from his right pocket and he began firing rounds at us on the train. The most terrifying situation, part of that situation is that the train was filled with commuters going home for the night. So we had several innocent bystanders in a very small metro train car with, an active shooter. The situation, like you'll hear people say, there's tunnel vision involved in it, and the situation goes by so quickly, but it seems like you're frozen in time. And fortunately for us, nobody was hurt on the train. The suspect, however, did die at the scene that day. So that was probably my most challenging day on the job to this day.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you, Mr. Bennett, for joining me. This has been Diaz with People in Perspective, and we'll see you next time.